I want to talk about the trends. I want to spend time on about 7 key trends that you ought to be looking at over the next, say, 12 to 18 months that are important for any business here. Secondly, I want to show you the one big mistake that I think maybe 90% of the companies out there are making right now. And if they could fix this one thing, it would change a whole lot about how secure your information really is. And then I want to end up by giving you some mindsets that need to be built into your organization, some things that you need to do in your organization that are not necessarily technical. In fact, a lot of them aren't technical. There are attitudes and mindsets in terms of how we handle data that needs to be adopted. You may have read in the Wall Street Journal recently that now the millennial generation, or what we might call Generation C, the connected generation, is the dominant generation in business. And that's something that whether you're in that generation or not, it's not good or bad. It's just a change in the way that we think and what the attitudes are in terms of how we deal and handle with technology. So Generation C, or connected, means it's been called the digitization megatrend, or everything's connected, the Internet of Things. And the expectation is that everything should be connected, right? You should be able to live inside your phone or inside your tablet. You don't necessarily have to have verbal communication anymore, but everything must be connected. And if you're going to buy anything, if you're going to sell anything, if you're going to get any kind of information, it has to be digital. That's just where it's going. So you just need to be aware of that. Now, it's interesting, in the article the Wall Street Journal mentioned that this generation tends to assume that their data is exposed already. Not true. It turns out that everything is getting connected, right? So anything can be hacked into, whether it's downloading matter of fact, if you look at the most recent, China's most recent fighter jet, it looks a lot like our F-35 fighter. I wonder why that is. Well, it's because a lot of this data was stolen, was downloaded a couple of years ago. It was reported in the Wall Street Journal as well. And of course, nobody admitted to taking it, but then all of a sudden this plane pops up and we go, well, that's interesting. But we can hack into anything today. We can hack into cars, we can hack into pacemakers, we can hack into anything. The question is, does somebody see a value in doing it? And the more things that are connected, the worse it gets, because nothing is necessarily safe when it's connected. Wall Street Journal, the greatest transfer of wealth in history is happening right now, and it's our data. And it's being slowly sifted away from the companies, but it doesn't have the attention-grabbing impact that body bags have when they come back from war. Companies, let's take Sony, for instance. Okay, here's a major organization that took major financial loss. I don't care what they wrote about in their emails to you. I don't know if you do or not. But I mean, it's their private business. It doesn't really matter what they wrote. I don't know what you wrote in your email either. And I'm sure if we all, were able to see what everybody's thinking in their mind, it would all be somehow politically incorrect. But the point is, all this stuff happens inside a company, and that company takes the ding for it, the financial hit for it. And because it's not big enough to call it an act of war, the government can't respond as though it's an act of war. You see the problem here? It doesn't matter how much information they share. The big company, whether it's your company or someone else's company, gets hit, and it's an act of war. Nobody can do anything about it because it's not big enough for the government to say, well, hey, we're going to attack this country. And you still take the financial loss anyway. It's not like you could have insurance for it, sure, but how do you recover a brand? And today what I want you to do is I want you to separate compliance from security, because they're not the same thing. Compliance is what happens. It's like bureaucracy, right? Bureaucracy is what happens when people don't do the right thing. So you impose more and more restrictions. Think about your home and how many rules, if you have kids, how many rules you end up having to make. And some of the rules are stupid, but it's, somebody keeps screwing up, so now there's a new rule in the house, right? Well, that new rule doesn't make everybody safe. It's just another rule, another thing people got to worry about, and another reason to get in trouble, but the thing still happens. Well, that's what compliance is, okay? It's just costing us money. But if we could take a few steps of action, then maybe we could slow down the piling on of more legislation and start thinking about what is it that actually needs to be done to secure your data. And so that's what we're going to get into. So the first thing I want to do is get you ready for the next national disaster so that you're not part of it, okay? So let's get into some trends here and some things that are going on. This right here is what you need to know. So if you get nothing else today, in fact, if you're not like way deep into your salad, you might want to just jot this little chart down. This is what your company needs to know. It's called the impact likelihood chart. It's a very simple model But I'll guarantee you that if you talk to all the people in the senior management ranks of your company, you'll find that they don't know what this looks like for your company. Now let me explain what this is. It's really very simple. Impact versus likelihood is a measure of risk. Okay? And what it does is it helps you make wise decisions. Now I want to give you a great example from my own life where I use this thing. So about 2 years ago, I weighed about 35 pounds more than I do right now. And I was not feeling well on Christmas Day. In fact, I'd been eating junk food for, several months since, Thanksgiving through Christmas time. And I remember that Christmas Day was just miserable. And that night, I went to sleep. Actually, I didn't go to sleep. I was tossing around in my bed. My wife went to sleep into some really great dream. And all night, I was worried about my health. I just didn't feel right. And so finally, around 4:30 in the morning, I just gave up and got up and went into my office, and I needed to consult with my health advisor, which of course is Google. All right, I know you've done this too, right? Googling, all right, what does it feel like to have a heart attack? Or what do you feel like? Or how do you know, right? And I'm Googling this, right? And I'm reading all these blog posts and all these lists and stuff, and I came up with a list that looked like it was pretty focused, pretty succinct, easy to understand. Even a brain like mine could understand it. So I started reading it. And as I'm going through, by the way, my wife is a healthcare professional, so I did not want to tell her about this. If anybody of you are related to a healthcare professional, you know what I mean, right? All of a sudden, there's all kinds of new bureaucracy in the house. Can't eat anything, you got to be on the next, just a mess. So I'm going through the list, and I'm going, oh man, I feel like that. Number 2, I feel like that too. And, I go all down the list, and every single one of them is a yes. And I get to number 10, and that's the clincher. Number 10 says, most people don't want to tell their spouse about this. Yeah, okay, tell me about it. Especially if they're a health professional, if it said that. And then it says, the thing is that unlike on television, this usually comes on slowly. And there's symptoms, the top 9 things, symptoms. And if you have those symptoms and you would tell somebody, chances are you could stop it. Waiting would be selfish. So I said, all right, I got to tell my wife. So at that point, I got up, went down the hall. My wife had already gotten up. She was downstairs Googling something meaningless compared to this. And I tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, exactly, we'll get to that. So I tapped her on the shoulder. I said, Tina, could I have a moment of your time? And of course, I don't usually schedule time with my wife, so she immediately was alarmed. What's the problem? What's going on? Is there an issue? Do you not feel well? And so I said, well, I'm not feeling well. And she said, do you feel like you're going to have a heart attack? And how did you know that? I said, well, I don't know, And she said, well, we need to go to the hospital. I didn't say yes, but we got to go anyway. So she's rushing me out the door, and we actually had company staying over with us overnight and everything. So she's yelling back, kids, see off the company and pack a bag. Your father's probably going to be overnight in the hospital. I'd never been overnight in the hospital, and I wasn't about to do that, So anyway, she rushed me out, though. And we get to the ER, and, I'm kind of wanting to quietly walk in and sign in, But not my wife. She's like, flies the door open, got a cardio patient, I'm like, can we just sort of settle? We don't know, Holy cow. So anyway, they come out with a stretcher, they wheel me in there, start plugging all kinds of stuff into me, withdrawing samples of all kinds and running biological tests. So over the morning, the tests start coming back. And they don't look that bad, Well, you got high cholesterol, your triglycerides are pretty high too, but you haven't had a heart attack, and it doesn't necessarily look like you're having one, and we don't think you're on the verge of having one, at least not imminent, but it's hard to tell those things. And we would like you to do a stress test, though, and there are some things we need to confirm, blah, blah, blah. But it's not all that bad, So over the morning, I'm starting to feel better, as you would, It must just be indigestion. Maybe I ate too much pie, I don't know. And so I'm starting to feel better. Like I'm ready to go home and have lunch, maybe a piece of pie or something. So the nurse comes in and she says, we're going to transport you over to the main hospital for an overnight stay because we want to observe you. Now, again, I've never been in a hospital overnight, and I don't want to go, So I'm like, wow, I didn't even know they didn't have beds in this place. And she said, well, this is just a big ER facility. So we've got the ambulance on its way. So I'm feeling really good now. It's like lunchtime, I'm ready to go home. Come on, Tina, let's go home. She's like, well, I think you need to stay overnight in all this. And so, you got to please your wife. So So I said, okay, yeah, I'll go, okay? So I said, well, wait a minute. Does our insurance, who's the insurance person that mentioned that? Does our insurance cover a transport like that? Well, she said, gee, I don't know. I said, well, maybe you should call them. So she does. She calls them up, and she comes back, and she says, it's not an emergency, so they won't cover it. It's going to be a $1,500 charge. $1,500. It's like 15 minutes of driving, you know? So I said, well, there's no way I'm doing that. So the nurse says, well, Mr. Stelzl, you have to go. And I said, well, if you pay the $1,500, I'll go. So she leaves. She didn't even answer me. A minute later, the doctor comes back, big clipboard in hand, looking really official. She comes in and she goes, Mr. Stelzl, you have to go to the hospital for observation. Ambulance is on its way. I said to her, it's $1,500 cash. She said, it doesn't matter. The ambulance is on its way. I said, it matters because I have to pay for it. It's my choice. And she said, Mr. Stelzl, your family, your life, your cholesterol, all these things could kill you. And your family would be like out by themselves. And I said, oh, I get it. I get it. I've had to pull out the impact likelihood chart at this point. I said, let me explain something to you here. All that is impact. That's not risk. Impact is FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. All that was true yesterday. All that was true 10 years ago. All that was true when I was 10. But the likelihood of that happening was almost zero. Now, this morning when I came in, I thought the likelihood was up here, like at 99%. And I was willing to pay anything. But now that the tests have come down all morning, I have been going down this chart, down to about here. And that's where I am right now. So either you're going to have to convince me that I'm still really way up here, or you're going to have to pay the $1,500. Or I'm just going to have my wife drive me. And at that point, she gave up, threw the clipboard down, brought in a bunch of papers for me to sign, released me, and my wife drove me to the hospital. This is the impact likelihood graph. If your company really understood what assets are in your company and what the impact would be, and they probably do, whatever data is important to you, whether it's innovations in your company, strategic plans, patents, customer data, financial data, payroll data, whatever. All that stuff is high impact if you lose it. But the question is, what is the likelihood that you will? And if you don't know that, you can't make a decision. You'll always be fumbling around, wondering, I don't see anything. And Home Depot didn't see anything, and JP Morgan didn't see anything, and Sony didn't see anything, but yet the hackers were in there for months. In fact, the FBI tells us that 14 months is the average time that a hacker will be inside a company before any evidence. I don't know if you read the CIO Journal, which is a section of the Wall Street Journal. It's a great thing to be reading, though, by the way. They've been talking a lot lately about who the CIO is, what that person's supposed to be doing, and how the job is changing. Also changing is the CISO position, by the way. Significant changes, which are actually replacing a lot of these people. So if you're in one of those roles, this might just be helpful in itself. If you're not, you probably are aware if you're in one of these roles. I'm sure you are. Maybe even worried about it. But maybe this will be helpful just to think through it like this. It used to be an operational job, right? DP management was an operational job. Are we up is the big question. How much uptime have we had? The graph in the data center. But the new job is really about business growth, right? How can we leverage technology? Wall Street Journal says every major decision, not technology decision, but every major decision must now go through the CIO office. Why? Because it's all dependent on technology. All of it is. If we look at this side, we're talking about what employees use, what the infrastructure looks like, all the typical stuff. What products do we choose? It's all operational stuff. But on that side, we're looking at how do we build our brand? How do we change our company? How do we grow this thing? How do we create customer experience, which is like the new buzzword out there, right? Technology, customer experience. This is what the millennial generation wants. And this person needs to be focused over there. Meanwhile, though, we've got all these pressures of rising costs and talent acquisition not being there, the competition leveraging, and then, of course, compliance eating all the money up, and the security issues out there, which, of course, are driving a lot of the compliance issues. It's very confusing. Meanwhile, all the end users are out there, putting stuff in the cloud, whatever app they want. And, of course, talking about big data analytics, moving into more intelligence that way, mobility, want to use my own device, using social business. And this complicates everything and changes the whole security architecture picture. It's very confusing. So let's look at the trends here quickly. It's a picture of my son, by the way. Tiny Tim, we call him. He was born at 13 pounds, I think. He's on a Mac right there, hacking into your company probably. Okay, he's 7 now. He was 3 when we took this picture. He's pretty serious, though, isn't he? He loves the computer. Anyway, it's that easy, though, right? Don't ever think that it's difficult. And, of course, if you've been in IT for any length of time, you know it is pretty easy to hack into somebody. You don't need to be technical. In fact, the hackers don't like us to call all the people out there hackers because most of them are just downloading code that was written by a hacker and running it. In fact, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal about a high school graduate in China. No computer background, but no job. And so he needed a way to make money. He downloaded a $250 program from the internet and started making $12,000 a day hacking into companies. You know how he got caught? Well, because he was a foolish young person, he started, touting about it on chat sessions on the internet. And of course, he got busted doing that. But if he hadn't, probably nobody would have known. He would have continued doing that. By the way, all that money's tax-free, right? It is simple to do. Lose your data if you don't make some changes. So let's look at the trends here quickly. It's a picture of my son, by the way. Tiny Tim, we call him. He was born at 13 pounds, I think. He's on a Mac right there, hacking into your company probably. Okay, he's 7 now. He was 3 when we took this picture. He's pretty serious, though, isn't he? He loves the computer. Anyway, it's that easy, though, right? Don't ever think that it's difficult. And, of course, if you've been in IT for any length of time, you know it is pretty easy to hack into somebody. You don't need to be technical. In fact, the hackers don't like us to call all the people out there hackers because most of them are just downloading code that was written by a hacker and running it. In fact, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal about a high school graduate in China. No computer background, but no job. And so he needed a way to make money. He downloaded a $250 program from the internet and started making $12,000 a day hacking into companies. You know how he got caught? Well, because he was a foolish young person, he started, touting about it on chat sessions on the internet. And of course, he got busted doing that. But if he hadn't, probably nobody would have known. He would have continued doing that. By the way, all that money's tax-free, right? It is simple to do. And there are 3 tools which you probably know well because they're not new. But I just want to share a few things about these tools as we go through the trends here. First of all, the bot's been around for a long time, right? If you don't really know what that means, it's just simply the same code that, say, Google uses to go out and index web servers. It's been around forever. But this is just a piece of software. It's not a virus. It just goes out, gets plugged in on people's computers. The reason I mention this is because people don't understand the power of this technology today. It's huge. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Phishing, of course, is how Anthem got attacked. Sending out emails. They're getting in better and better at sending emails that look like real email. The problem is only the IT people get this. So when you talk about us, it's fine, but talk about administrative assistants trying to get their job done as quickly as possible. I don't know about your family, but I got a line at my office door every day of people wanting to show me emails all day long. All my kids, my wife, can we open this? Can we open that? Can't open it. Just don't open anything. But this one down here is the one that's typically left out of most security assessments. It's assumed that we should just look for vulnerabilities. It's a waste of time to look for vulnerabilities. We should be looking at how people can get in. And Stephen Mitnick wrote a great book called The Art of Deception, where he explains how to talk anybody into giving you their data, their passwords, anything. Art of Deception. Kevin Mitnick, sorry. It's a great read. It's worth reading. I don't know who he was writing it for, the bad guys or the good guys. Of course, he was an old-time hacker, which got caught, went to jail, and of course now he's a security consultant. That's how that works. So let's look at these concerns. The malware, the bot that I talked about, if you're not familiar with the power of this, you should Google Stuxnet. Are you familiar with Stuxnet? We're not going to go deep into that or not. But the point is, someone was able to release software, somebody, I don't know, US, Israel, somebody, was able to release software on the internet and actually get it to land on a specific computer in the whole world, over in Iran, and blow up a centrifuge, actually a whole series of them, that are building nuclear weapons, supposedly. I mean, that's powerful. A little piece of software can do that. Meanwhile, disguising all the symptoms of the centrifuges so that people who are operating them don't know what's going on. And as we go more and more to the Internet of Things, I don't know what you've got on the Internet, but everything's going. I mean, you know, everything in my house is on the Internet. Concern number 2 is this mobility movement. Now, I am not against BYOD, letting people have their own device. This is going to happen. I don't care if your company allows it today or not, but, you know, it was 20 years ago, I didn't count, maybe it was 20 years ago, that people said, we're not going to let our company people use the Internet. Does anybody remember that? You know, in the late 90s, we're not going to let them use the Internet. Well, I got news for you. Most people wouldn't work for your company if they couldn't use the Internet today, right? Everything's on the Internet. And then it was instant messaging. We're not going to let anybody use instant messaging. Well, you know, look at it, right? And the future people, the millennial generation particularly, and even I wouldn't do this, work for a company that would make me carry multiple devices, you know? I mean, it's bad enough going through TSA today to have to go through multiple devices. I'm just not going to do it. I mean, everything is on my computer. My entertainment, you know, you got to have your own movies now if you fly U.S. Airways, right? Because they don't have any entertainment online. And your banking is on there, your social network is on there, and all your business is on there, and it's all jumbled together, and you're just going to do it that way. But the mindset that's been created here is that all data is the same. This is the way the millennial generation thinks. All data is the same. It's all on my computer. It's all mine. So when somebody leaves, whose device is that? It's mine. Who can see this data? I don't know. Nobody. Everybody. It's a mindset that where data used to be where? It used to be in the data center. Data is not in the data center anymore. Now, number 2 is related to that, and that's the whole social media, social business craze. But again, it's a mindset issue here that I want to talk about, not the fact that people are on social media wasting away their day on Facebook or whatever. The issue here is that the new generation of people that live in this world are willing to put anything on the Internet. Case in point is all the people who send out, you know, naked pictures of themselves. Now think about this for a minute. Do you remember, you know, 10, 15 years ago when it was scary to put anything on the Internet? Like you wouldn't put your picture on the Internet 20 years ago. You wouldn't write a blog post because you wouldn't want anybody to know that you wrote something, right? You wouldn't do that. But today, even ugly people put their, you know what I mean? Put their naked picture on the Internet. I mean, it's weird. So if people would do that, what about your data? Concern number 4 is that people think that stuff behind passwords is secure. You know, now you probably already know this if you're in a technology role, but you should write it down anyway just to remind yourself daily that passwords don't work. It's very simple. Passwords don't work. Recent Wall Street Journal article quote, Mike McConnell, every major organization out there has been hacked into. It just has. And he said in there, today it's a matter of just making sure that they don't get to the right data. And of course, they are getting to the right data. Okay? You can get in. In fact, another point I just want to make about this, which is interesting, I see companies doing pen tests, which you have to do. First of all, it's part of the compliance regulations out there. You got to do your pen test. But when you do a pen test, you should not be thinking, we're doing this to see if we are secure. I've heard a lot of IT people say that. We're doing this pen test to see if we are secure. Do you see what the problem with that is? Ask this question. If the pen tester doesn't get in, does that mean I'm secure? No. What does it mean? It means the pen tester's no good. Okay, so get another one. Now, let's say the pen tester does get in. Does that mean I'm not secure? No. It doesn't mean that, because you can always get in, and at some point you're secure enough. Now, this is interesting. Concern number 5 is about the internal threat. Now, people used to talk a lot about this, but it's actually worse than people really think it is. First of all, Wall Street Journal reported recently 75% in a survey of employees admit that they steal data. And you know that the other 25% are lying. Because when you work in a company for years and you've invested your life in this stuff, you do take, I don't mean you, I just mean everybody but you, does take their data with them. They just do. But there's also frequently somebody cooperating with somebody outside when a major attack happens. Because the people outside are making a fortune and they're willing to pay more money than you would pay a typical IT person. Number 6, the nation-state sponsored attacks are growing, right? Who is the most active out there? China, right? It's government endorsed. And think about it. You know, here we have a communist government who is used to owning everything. It doesn't really occur to them that this data belongs to somebody else. Because they don't think that way. They're lacking innovation, Mike McConnell says in Wall Street Journal. In order to keep up economically, which of course they're trying to become a world power economic powerhouse over there, they need innovation. And then number 7, we should just be aware that cyber terrorism is growing. A lot of the Al-Qaeda people and so forth don't have the equipment necessarily to do a very sophisticated job, but Sony is a great example. And you can see now from Sony is a good example, a good case study of what happens when this happens to your company. Nobody can really do anything about it. It's just a matter of how much insurance can we claim on this thing and can we recover about this. First of all, it is not a technical problem. Okay, it's not a technical problem. Although there's some technology is going to be used to solve the problem. But let me explain it to you in a very simple analogy here. Using a house, because all of us know what a house is. We all probably live in either a house or an apartment. And my guess is that most of you feel pretty safe when you're in your home at night. Like last night, for instance, I was sleeping over in the Marriott Hotel, which I felt very secure in. But it didn't even occur to me that my family might be at risk. You know, I slept through the night. It wasn't like I woke up in the middle of the night and went, oh no, I wonder if somebody breaking into my house. I didn't do that. Why? And so I want you to think about how you protect your home. How do you secure your home? And it's pretty simple, right? I don't know if you lock your doors at night. We always locked our doors at night. I grew up in New York. I remember one time I left the car doors unlocked in the garage, and I got in trouble for that. So that was the last time, by the way. Right? I remember my father said, I don't care if the car was in the house. You always lock the doors on the car. But here's the things, right? We got doors, we got windows, locks, you might have some kind of fence, you might have an alarm, maybe you're connected into ADT or somebody that monitors your house, maybe you have a crime watch program, which you know is a waste of time. You know, maybe you have a dog, maybe you have can you have a gun in Boston? Is that okay? That's why I moved to North Carolina. You can have guns, all my kids have guns, I have guns. Our police force is sort of useless though. And of course we carry insurance. So we have all this stuff to protect our home. But you know, this is not what protects our home, believe it or not. It's what we think protects our home. It's what's been sold to us. You know, the alarm guy told me if I bought his alarm, we'd be secure, but it's not true. But there is something that protects my home. And it turns out that it is a procedure, it's a process that uses these components, and if that process is built correctly, it will work. And if it's not built correctly, even if I have all that stuff, it won't work. It's comprised of a protection level, a detection level, and a response level. It's a timed process. Something blocks people from getting in, people break in, something goes off, there's a timed response, somebody hopefully gets stopped. That's the process. Now, of these 3 columns, I'm going to take a little vote here, a little poll, a little interaction. Which one of these columns is the most important column? Okay, so take a look at it. Which one is most important? It's the protection column, the detection, or the response. You need all 3. They all must be timed, they all must work, but one of them is critical and must be nearly perfect. Okay, so you got to vote, otherwise there's like no dessert for you. Okay? All right, so how many people think it's column 3, the response column? Okay? All right, we got 1, 2, 3, and you have to vote. 4, okay? How many people think it is column 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Wow, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's a lot of people. Nobody's going to want to vote for column 1 now. Who wants column 1? We only have 2?
We got a champion.
All right.
We
all right,
both
good.
live in New Hampshire, actually.
There you
We
go.
don't lock our doors, and we have a gun.
There you go. Well, that's column 3, the gun, right? Okay. Now, I suspect that we have a lot of IT people. Now, if I took the same vote with people who were non-IT people, I'd get a different number. Of course, some of you are wondering if all the people that chose detection are actually right. It turns out that you are right. But if you went to most audiences, because I've spoken to lots of audiences, I'd say that people who are not specifically in the security space always choose column 1, even though that was the lowest chosen column in this group here. Most of them will choose column 1. Because that's what they've been told, that to keep people out, you'll be safe. And it's not true. And if you look at the bank, right, when does a bank get robbed more often, at nighttime or daytime? Daytime. Do you ever wonder why that is? The banks are open during the daytime. Okay? That is not the reason. Okay? It's not the reason. The reason is because the vault manufacturer tells you how long it takes to break into the vault. It's actually part of the specifications of the vault. So when you buy a vault, you can actually get one that's rated for, fire, rated for torches, and rated for breaking in with different kinds of tools. And it will tell you that this particular safe can be broken into with tools in 30 minutes. This one over here requires a torch, but it can be broken into in, say, 60 minutes. So the burglar knows that the bank knows that it takes an hour to break into their safe, and it can be broken into. But in 1 hour, the police also know that as soon as the alarm goes off, that the people are starting to break into the safe, and they got 60 minutes to get there. And so they'll stop by, pick up some donuts, and show up at 55 after, and they'll stop it. But during the daytime, it's unknown. Because the bank door is open and the vault door is open, it's not because they can get in more easily, it's because it's unknown what the response time will be. That's why. And of course, now everything's moving to cyber break-ins because it's not predictable enough. That's why. Now, can you imagine if the firewall manufacturer, if Check Point, had a sign on their firewall that said, here's how long it takes to break in, right? But people want to believe that you can't break in. That's why they've had to build other technology to detect, and they do. They do that, right? Because they know that you can break in. But if you can detect them and respond in time, you'll be in good shape. Now, the problem is 80%, according to Gartner Group this year, 80% of companies today have invested 80% of the IT investment today of any company is in column 1. 80% of it. When this is the most important column. Very few companies can actually detect, and some have detection technology in place. Reference Target, for instance. Nobody here works for Target, right? Before I, slam them and all this stuff. But they actually had technology in place to detect a hack. I was working with a company in New York City, which I won't name, financial organization. And they had stuff in place and running. But they didn't really understand how to use it. They didn't understand how to correlate the alerts. They didn't understand how to analyze the data. And so therefore, they didn't really have a detection strategy. They were simply collecting detection data. Big difference. And so there was no response plan. And so that next morning, I got a call, and they said, we can't get into any of our stuff. Our routers were locked out of them. We're locked out of our servers. And then the guy asked me the funny question, should we disconnect from the internet? Like, yeah, I think so. Because we can get in there and break into the stuff for you and try to recover it, try to get it back. Detection is the most important piece of this whole puzzle. But there better be a response plan right behind it, right? Because if there's not, you'll detect it, your alarm will go off, it'll be like a car alarm going off in the parking lot, and everybody's hitting their button trying to turn off whose car is that? And nobody's looking. There has to be a response plan timed behind it, and most companies don't have that in place either. So take a look. Do we detect? Can we detect? How long would it take to detect? Now, if you look at traditional security, here it is, 80% of the budget. Firewall, passwords, encryption. This is like your front door. Like, how many of you went door shopping with your spouse and said, oh, honey, look at this door. This is going to be really secure. That's not the way you bought your door, is it? No, you were looking for something that looked nice. And it's not secure. This is not secure. So when we look at how organizations are secure today, we get all these statistics. 87% of web servers are compromised. 90% of end nodes are compromised at some time, point or another. If you went back to your company today, I can almost guarantee that you have unauthorized software on at least one computer in your company that somebody outside installed that does not work for your company. And that means they have access to that computer to anything on it, meaning logging keystrokes, capturing passwords of whatever that thing logs into, listening to meetings through your speakers, watching you through your video. By the way, it's easy to turn that little green light off. Okay, I would almost guarantee that at least 99% of the companies represented here have at least one computer. And unlike a virus, you only need one. You just need one of those compromised for people to start sifting data out of your organization. Just like TJ Maxx and Albert Gonzalez, way back in the 2005 timeframe. That's the way he did it. Just a couple of computers. He went to work every day at the hotel across the street from TJ Maxx, and he just spent all day siphoning data through those couple of computers. That's how they do it. It's very simple process. This is what your security strategy should look like. It's not a product. It's not a keep it out. It's a protection, detection, response with a focus on detection that goes across administrative things, which means like user awareness, getting the people out there who are using the data, understanding what they're doing, technology that helps us automate some of this process, and some physical things to make sure that nobody can get to that stuff physically. All 9 boxes must work together. This is what creates security. I want to give you some of the mindset, some of the things that you need to change about the way you think about data. Maybe not you, but your organization. This is what you should bring back to them. This is how you should be thinking. First of all, there's an asset mindset. The asset mindset thinks about the value of assets. Digital assets is what I'm talking about. Okay? Most of the people out there think technology. Good example, there was a guy in the UK not too long ago who had £1 million worth of data on this DVD. And he sent it through interoffice mail to somebody in the office. It didn't make it. It was reported on in the Wall Street Journal, and I was happy that the Wall Street Journal writer picked this up, right? If this had been cash, think about this, right? If this had been cash, would you have put it in an interoffice envelope? No, you would have hired like an armed guard to transport this, right? But because it was on something that cost about $1, you just dropped it in an envelope and sent it off. See, this is the technology mindset. This is the way people are thinking. Oh, it's just it's an iPhone. I got it insured. I left it in the train station. So what? But yet there's a bunch of them on the black market out there, and they have data on them. The asset mindset is thinking about the value of data that is on those things. Number 2, we need to be PDR equipped, meaning protection, detection, response, focused on that, understanding it doesn't work to keep people out. You cannot keep people out. They'll always get in. The question is, can you detect and stop in time? Number 3 is one of those politically incorrect ones. In the company, it seems like the higher up in the organization one gets, the more access they think they should have. And I'm sure you run into this. Different managers in the organization think they should have access to everything. But it's not true, right? We cannot give access to everyone. But the same is true in the IT organization, and it's almost worse here. Especially if you have a small IT organization, which I know some of you that mentioned to me you do, right? That there's no separation of duty. And by the way, if you're one of those people, you want to get your company to divide some of that responsibility so you can't be held liable. Because if something goes wrong and you're one of the few people that have all the keys to the kingdom, you could be in a lot of trouble having to prove that you didn't do it, right? You cannot give access to people. Just like in accounting, right? There's always an audit. The accountant gets it, right? It's okay to get audited. Like, they're not worried about that. They have to. It's just part of business, right? But come in and audit the people that have data access, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're intruding on my stuff, right? You want to look through my laptop. That's mine, We need to be restrictive. And then number 4, we need to build this digital mindset. And what this is it's understanding how data works. You can't visualize data. It's not concrete. It's not something you can grab a hold of. And so people don't think about it. But as you create data and you use it in applications and you transmit it around, like, in the air, and you store it places and archive it and dispose of it, the value of data changes as it goes through a life cycle. So this one down here, disposal, is one that really gets me. Most people don't understand, right? I'm thinking of your end users out there. They don't understand that if you delete a file that it's not actually gone, right? That's confusing to them. But they need to understand digital. They also don't realize that they're creating data all the time, right? You make a phone call, you create data. It's amazing to me how many politicians have gotten in big trouble for some kind of affair out there because they just don't get that. Like, you make a phone call, it's recorded. You send an email, a text message, a Facebook, whatever you do, it's recorded forever. It's out there. And then there's the holistic mindset of thinking all the boxes together, which we talked about already, but we need to have that picture in mind. Then this one, another politically incorrect one, is it okay to interrogate people? Is it okay to interrogate the network? I have a lot of fun with this one at home because I've told my kids, by the way, I have 7 kids, and they all have computers and stuff, And I've told them, and 1 wife, by the way, I didn't mention that. And I've told them, hey, this is my airspace, right? I own this. So if you send an email, it's mine. I love coming to the table and bringing up stuff like, oh, I see that, Susie broke up with Jack or whatever. And my daughter would be like, how do you know that? I'm like, because I'm reading your email, I got keyloggers on every computer in my house. I know what's going on. But the last one, and I'll end with this one. The last one is being poised. It's being ready. It's assuming that people are coming in. And I want to share with you a thing that woke me up about this. Didn't even have to do with data security, but in the idea of just being ignorant and not understanding what's going on. I used to be a lifeguard. And in fact, not only was I a lifeguard, but I was the guy who taught the lifeguards and certified them. The WSI is what they used to call that, right? Red Cross. And so I worked at this camp, and all these counselors would come to camp, and I would certify all the ones that would go through the swimming class and, train them and everything, get them certified, give them a card. At the end of the summer, one year, I think it was the last year I was working there, the camp director came to me and said, would you take everybody to the South Shore, Long Island, that's where I grew up, that's where I was working. Take them all to the South Shore. Now we were, I usually lifeguarded in a lake or a pool. I hadn't really ever lifeguarded at the ocean, but when I got there was nobody there. We got there early in the morning before the big crowd showed up. A few people, down the beach and stuff. Set up our stuff, and I got everybody paired up and all that the way you're supposed to, and told them here, you can swim within these bounds, and I'm going to stand on the beach here with my whistle and twirl it like a good lifeguard does. And so they're out there swimming, and the waves are big, and it's kind of cold water out there, probably not as cold as it is here, but it's cold down there. And it wasn't very long before all of a sudden I heard this yell, and I look out there, and there's one of my junior counselors who is a lifeguard, is caught in the riptide and is like going out to sea. And she's waving her hand and she's saying, I can't come in. And I'm saying, well, try to swim in, like a good lifeguard should. And I'm looking at the waves, and they're big, huge waves. The waves are huge that day. And she's way out there. And I'm sitting there evaluating, could I actually make it out there? And as I sort of watched her drifting out to sea, I was asking myself questions like, if I went out there, I'd die, so that's not a good decision. Well, what happens if she dies? Will I lose my job? Will I go to jail? I mean, crazy thoughts. This is somebody's life, And all of a sudden, this guy comes running by me, dives in the water, swims out there. He's got this big orange torpedo with him. Turns out he's the ocean lifeguard. He's just shown up. He saw her out there. He runs out there. He saves her, brings her back in. He didn't say anything to me. But I just felt so small standing there on the beach thinking, I came here assuming that there'd be no problem. And so I wasn't prepared. I wasn't looking. I was just ignorant to the whole thing. And I almost lost somebody out there in the ocean simply because I didn't take the time to take a look. And so today what I'm asking you to do is to go back and think about the impact likelihood graph. What does your impact likelihood graph look like? You have assets. They're all high impact, or at least some of them are high impact, some more than others. But the question is, do you know what the likelihood is that they will get attacked a certain way? If you don't look for that, if you don't assess that, then you may find out 14 months from now, like the FBI says, that you're standing on the beach with me going, gee, I just had no idea. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff. Thanks for your attention. I hope this was helpful.